people have been trying to make it out ever since they began that the anti-judicial reform, anti-Netanyahu protests in Israel represent some sort of special paradigm shift. But what they are is one side of Zionism just having a slight, largely inconsequential conflict with another side of Zionism, and they all still really fundamentally agree on the most important things, namely continuing the existence of their ethno-supremacist racial state at the expense of Palestinians. So there's really nothing about it that is worth supporting, nothing about it that anyone should care about. The fact that they can get the numbers that they've been getting for these anti-judicial reform, anti-Netanyahu protests just goes to show how morally bankrupt they are, that they have never turned out like that for Palestinians. The biggest anti-Zionist protests you get in Israel are one of two things. One, it's free anarchists, which, good on them, but they represent a 0.001% of the population. Or it's traditional Jerusalem-based pre-Zionism Jews who protest against Zionism. There's nothing else aside from that. When there's a price rise in cottage cheese, which I'll show you, there were massive protests against the Jerusalem Post, apparently described as the Great Cottage Cheese Uprising. So the price of cottage cheese went up, and they turned out into the streets in the hundreds of thousands, protesting. Palestinians are mass murdered in their name. Their land is stolen more and more every day. They live in their houses. They live on their land. We don't give a shit about that. What we care about is cottage cheese. What we care about is things that minorly inconvenience us or make us feel a little bit bad. What this fundamentally is just a conflict between different factions within a fascist, ethno-nationalist settler state, neither of them that wants to fundamentally change anything that's really bad about it. They just have different visions for how this fascist, ethno-nationalist settler state should be for themselves. They don't care about the actual victims whose dispossession and whose oppression its existence depends on. Doesn't matter to them at all. At most, they will claim to be anti-occupation, but the ones who claim that are very few, and what they mean by occupation is not what I mean by occupation, because all of Israel is occupied Palestinian land. What they mean is maybe we can withdraw from the West Bank and, we can keep everything else. We can just keep them confined to Gaza and the West Bank, and we can take everything else for ourselves. That's what a Zionist means when you talk about occupation. It's not the same thing at all. So yeah, you shouldn't take these protests in Israel seriously. 99.9% of Israelis are Zionists, and they're proud of it. And if you start asking them questions about actual real Palestinian liberation and real Palestinian justice, they squirm. So don't be fooled by this shit. All it deserves is to be offhandedly discounted as the inter-fascist, inter-ethno-nationalist, inter-settler conflict that it really is.